Hey everyone, I'm Chucky Kim. I'm the head of music experience at Artiphon, and we're here in lovely, gorgeous Brooklyn, New York, as you can tell. And even lovelier, we have Kimbra, the illustrious Kimbra. And today we'll be talking a little bit about not just these presets that Kimbra wonderfully gave us the privilege of creating into like an artist music experience, but more specifically, how Kimbra's intentions and what she went through was placed into this thing for you all. So we're very excited to have you, Kimbra. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
There's one question I always like to ask people, and I think it's a really good way of kind of situating your place in the universe, right? And the question is, what is your favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh, damn. Whoo! I definitely like cookies and cream a lot. And, sea salt caramel Talenti.
I don't know, I have another one.
You gotta get that. That's amazing. Yeah, it's got like little bits of like crunchy pretzels in there and sick.
So you like the textures?
Yeah, I like the textures. Yeah, just like my sonic landscapes.
Well, so have you always, so like your music has always been this like really rich, like almost like culinary experience, like going through all these different flavors and all that.
Thank you.
Like what do you, not just like what do you point to the source of that, but like what about that really attracts you?
Yeah. Well, I think it comes from an amalgamation of influences, first and foremost. I had many phases as a young person musically. In fact, it became a challenge of mine to discover as many genres as I could. I got a little obsessive with it. Now, when you're feeding yourself such diversity, that becomes what you create. My attraction to lots of different genres is finding the common pattern. Like a friend of mine once explained to me that a lot of metal is based off Latin rhythms,
Oh,
like that's a Latin beat, but if you put that with distorted guitars and a kick drum, doing double kick work with Latin beats, it's actually really similar. So I love to find the common thread in a lot of different genres. It's just really exciting for me and stimulating.
Wait, so what's like, then tell me like what's a common thread that surprised you recently?
Well, okay, let's talk about the Scandinavians. Scandinavians have an interesting like approach to melody. So, one of my favorite bands is called Mew, and they have these kind of very ethereal, mystical melodies that they do, but it's set against a very heavy, dense bed of electric guitars. But then you also look at ABBA, and they have a very particular kind of melodic world too. It is very like chromatic, but also like surprises you. It's just, I can't even explain it, but it's a particular thing that Scandinavian songwriters do. And if you listen to a diverse range of music from that part of the world, you'll notice melodically a similar thread. Truly, I'll make a playlist for you.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many different kinds of creators, right? Some creators will really just kind of zone out in their own world, like, they don't really move around very often. Other people get super inspired by going out and seeing and feeling different things.
Right.
Do you feel like, at least in relation to like this current project that you're working on, do you feel like it's the result of, being like solitary? Do you feel like you pulled in different things from where you've been?
Yeah, well, this record was made in the height of the pandemic, so of course it had to be solitary by necessity. I was working with my co-producer Ryan Lott before everything struck, and we were bouncing over Zoom and over the internet. We already had established a working relationship over the internet. So when the pandemic hit, it kind of actually was already a muscle we were using. This record is a output from a very internal space. Wrestling and reckoning with my inner world, the chaos that lives in there, and the contemplative.
What about the contemplative?
Well,
So curious.
I think we all had to live with silence a lot more than we're used to in the past 2 years, 3 years. I mean, contemplation to me is kind of a space of reflection. I mean, it's usually used in the context of prayer or meditation. To be contemplative is to sort of sit with the moment. I guess it's the spectrum, right? The spectrum is there's chaos on one end and then there's calm on the other. And we're always sort of oscillating between the two, same as our earth, So there's songs on my new album that really sit in that space of quiet, very raw. And then there's songs that are just explore the density of human experience, which is a lot like the song we're going to explore today.
Yeah.
The chaos, the tension, the frustration. But on the other side of that, when you enter into it fully, there is peace.
Yeah.
And I wanted to explore that too.
It feels like there was, just in the way that you were describing it, it feels like this album itself was like your meditation, right? It was your way of kind of getting through all of these things.
Yeah, what do they say? You can't go around it, you got to go through it, right? You got to go into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it became a meditation of sorts, for sure.
You know, like, so when I think about your music and when I've heard your different works, and I think the things that I really most love are like your videos of you playing just live, right?
Okay.
Because it's like, it's always so, it's not just live interpretations, but they just feel like fundamentally unique things and of the moment, right? And it seems like you have like this wonderful ability to just kind of channel the things that you're in at that moment. And I was thinking about your voice, and it's like, your voice has, it's like the voice itself is like such an ancient thing, right? It's like the one thing that as humanity, we've held on forever. It's the one thing that we constantly seek to use. And yet you have this whole other side of all of like this technology that these things, you know, maybe sometimes they conflict, maybe sometimes there's a marriage. I'm curious about like how you've been able to navigate the use of these technologies, but also with something so ancient and visceral as like
yeah,
your voice.
keep it organic, right? Because that's the risk that you run, is everything becomes super synthetic, which is totally an aesthetic. I mean, I kind of love that about hyperpop and certain styles, but I do want to maintain the rawness of human emotion and the subtlety and nuance of the human voice, which unfortunately gets deleted when everything goes through autotune.
Right.
Technology, honestly, I want to give a really profound answer, but it's like, I just get really bored really easily. So I think I'm always trying to keep myself feeling like a kid. And there's nothing more childlike than picking up a piece of technology and being like, doo, 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 hee, hee. You know, it's like, immediately you're back to being 7 years old.
Yeah.
I love that feeling. And so I'm keeping myself entertained. I'm also looking for ways to intensify the emotions. If I'm wanting to express rage and violence, there's only so much I can do as a vocalist. I can do a lot, but I need the cutting, the razor of electronics. So technology is helping me to fulfill the full dynamic. I also like the challenge, Chucky. I like to be challenged on stage. If it's too sing the song top to bottom, I don't know, I want to give the audience a sense of me being on the edge of my seat too. Because if I'm going to ask them to be on the edge of their seat, engaged, well, they're going to watch me be engaged. I want them to sense that I might make a mistake at any moment, and I do make mistakes, you know.
I mean, you recovered pretty well, you know, from what I've seen. So how did you, in this album process, right, like, what were some of the things that intrigued you about the technology and how you were thinking about the music? Because it was, you know, obviously there was the virtual stuff going on, but then there's also this other moment where you're in your world, right? Like you have all your toys and everything around you.
Well, interestingly, I wrote a lot of this new record on the Wurlitzer. I have a Whirly at home, and I'm a guitarist first and foremost and, you know, programmer, but I wanted to get off the instruments that I knew well and move on to something that I didn't know well, which is the piano. To be fair, a lot of the songs were not written on that instrument. A lot of the songs started with beats. I mean, that's how I write.
Of course.
But I wanted to start a lot of the ballads from a very classic place. Now, when you start with something so simple as the piano or the Wurlitzer, you know, all options become open to you for the production. And interestingly, Ryan Lott used the piano as a very prominent instrument throughout the record, but affecting it electronically. So you'll hear a lot of piano that starts off very organic and then gets twisted into a world. It's get taken off and manipulated. And it becomes a strange, foreign sound, but it all originated from a piano. Or same with strings. Strings running through a space echo, they become alien. I love that. So bit of a different process, you know, rather than starting with heavy levels of technology, actually starting very, you know, classic,
Yeah.
and then moving it into a morphed,
Yeah.
uglier place.
Yeah, I just kind of thought about it. It was like, there was this part, these chords, were these like Wurlitzers that you started off with, or were these like synthesizers?
So those would have started on a very basic preset in Ableton.
Yeah.
I wrote the song with Liz, who goes under the name Brux. She first laid down those chords, that, you know, on just probably a very basic sound.
Sure.
We already had the beat. The beat was driving everything. We already had the chant. What you doing in my head?
Yeah.
I can't. This is what set off the whole tone.
Yeah.
So now we
That came
wanted.
first. Ah.
Now, yes.
Interesting.
Now we wanted the contemplative. Now we wanted the reflection. So she put down these chords that I feel are almost Tom York evocative, you know? Then we thought, what do we want the sound to be? So the chordal information comes first, then it's like, okay, now what's the texture?
Getting your stems, not only was it really interesting to kind of, I felt like we were like on an excavation, right? Kind of like finding these little moments which would be beautiful placed into this. And we kind of took your song and put it into this format for people to play. And I'm so curious of not only what that means to you, but what that might mean for your fans.
Well, I love to bring people into my world, express my internal landscapes at a time when I find it hard to fully articulate that. I feel like my fan base is really going to connect with this because I think they're real listeners. That's one thing I've noticed about the people that come to my shows. They're deeply thoughtful listeners. I have such an interesting cross-section of fans that come to my shows. There's like young people, there's like pop music lovers that know the Gautier song and then they've listened to a couple of others. There's the diehards, there's the music nerds that are very musical. And then there's like the prog rock dads. Like the dads that were really into prog in the 70s and now they're like, oh, I haven't found an artist that I really liked since Genesis or, you know, something like that. And so it's really nice for me to be able to offer something that can be for the nerdy, you know, tech people, which is definitely me.
It's also me, yeah.
These people. And also for the layman, you know, the person that's not a musician per se, but is a creative and likes to engage the inner child and explore the deeper side of what I do as a producer. You know, I'm very passionate about production. I'm not, you know, not just a singer. I want to invite, especially women and people of minorities, to be empowered as sound designers. So I think this is a way that I can kind of live out some of my deeper values of not just being a performer, entertainer, but like the craft.
Yeah.
The craft of songwriting and production. Yeah, I think there's...
So this is not your first time playing with an Orba. And what were you, so kind of dialing back, going all the way back to whenever that first moment was, what were your first impressions of it and when you got it?
My experience with Orba 1 was super fun because I'd never played on something that was so intuitive. You know, it was like really responsive to the amount of touch. I work a lot with chaos pads, so I'm very acquainted with the intensity of pushing on XY pads and how that changes the nature of the delay and stuff. So it was very natural for me to play on the Orba. But I think, you know, I always craved to have my own sounds on it. You know, there's only so far you can go with presets. So this is why it's so exciting to now be able to work with a whole new range of sounds. I was especially intrigued as to what you cut up because it might have been different to what I would have cut up on the song. You feel me? It's like cool to hear like, oh, you found that sound most compelling.
Well, it was a privilege to look through it. I was like, wow, like there's like so much ear candy.
Yeah.
So I felt like I was like a kid at the candy store, just kind of, you know, like the Dylan's candy stores?
Totally,
I felt like I was just like getting all the choice candies into the bag.
Yes. And that's a lot of that is the contributors. Liz is such a sound designer. She, you know, is very, very visceral with her sounds, very physical sounds. Now Ryan added all of those cinematic sweeps. He put a lot of that stuff into it, and like weird violins that are like that kind of shit. Yeah, so it's kind of cool because both their personalities are on it, and you know my role in the production was mainly, I'm always the last filter on the sounds, so I'll go through all the final plugins. I'll get the kicks, and I'll be like, okay, decapitator.
Yeah,
Get the bass, decapitator.
Yeah.
But
Drum Fender mode,
right, and a lot of the vocal production, of course. But it's really a testament to the people involved.
And now you have it literally in your hand, which is kind of crazy to think about.
You
it's
have
like
it in
all
your
of these souls, right? It's like,
Yeah, true. It's like Jumanji.
I know.
It's like, where's it gonna take you?
That's Jumanji. Right?
Yeah.
Yo!
Love that.
Well, tell me about the song, actually. I'm curious about it.
The origin story of Replay is I was invited to contribute to a songwriting camp, which I'm usually pretty skeptical about. I just haven't always enjoyed them. But this particular camp was curated by Francois Titez, who was the producer of somebody that I used to know, and also my first album, Vows. So I trusted him. I knew he was going to bring along amazing people, and he did. And one producer he brought along was Brooks, who I instantly clicked with. I had just come out of a breakup that was on my mind constantly. I couldn't escape the emotions and complexity of the situation. And sometimes I'm trying to block out my emotions when I'm writing because I think I don't want to get distracted. I just want to think about the storyline of what we're writing. Then other days I think, fuck it, I'll just write about the emotions. Like instead of trying to push them away, like let me just lean into exactly what's going through my mind right now. So Replay, became this complete journey into exactly that feeling of not being able to escape the neurosis of just thinking about a person constantly, replaying the images, replaying the intimacy, replaying the memories. And part of you wants to escape,
Yeah.
but part of you doesn't, because to escape would be to let them go. So we hang on and we feed it, and it becomes compulsive and destructive. So now we have the concept. How are we going to execute that with sounds? So everything had to cut like a razor. The kick had to punch. Everything had to cut. Metallic, harsh, aggressive, coupled by
Very like,
exactly soaring.
yeah.
This is both sides of a breakup, right?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I can't believe you got that into sound shape.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that's the artist's goal, right?
Yeah.
Is to convey the internal landscape of their mind, or of course the external landscape of our world.
Yeah. Like the amount of work that it takes into just making
Right.
that sound, right? And the amount of thought.
Thought.
Does it match what I'm feeling?
Yeah.
Does it express the story?
Because you have such an opportunity to speak to people with every sound. People think it doesn't matter, the detail.
Yeah.
But it does, because it's vibration. Every little thing you put into a song is going to hit people in ways that you're not even aware of.
Right.
Subconscious.
And you definitely achieved that on that. I mean, for me, it was a pleasure just to, the fact that you entrusted me with the stems, that's kind of like, that's a really, it's like opening up your drawers.
Your dirty
You know what I
laundry,
mean?
yeah.
It's just like, because you get to kind of see like, oh, okay, they made a little cut here and all that.
Yeah, and all the bad fades from my Pro
right?
Tool sessions.
But opening it up, it was this, it was like such an interesting, like peek into your mind, right? And obviously the producer too, but I think it was such like a wonderful journey for me, and it definitely felt like a study of just going to see like how, in certain sections, like not only would you layer one sound with another, but you would take out certain sounds and how these sounds would flow together in climax and crescendo.
Yes.
It was pretty marvelous.
Thank you. One big shift in the production of the song was the addition of the bass. Let me show you. This was played by Taylor Graves. I brought the song to him because I felt like it needed another lift.
Yeah.
It never had that. The original demo never had that bass.
Interesting.
And I was like, this is cool, but where's the drop? Like, where's the punch of just like, it needed another character. That's a good way to put it. So I sent it to Taylor. We were jamming at his place in LA, and he just started playing that bass line.
It's grimy.
Yeah, I think it was on a Moog, and we'd...
Yeah, it sounds like a Moog, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh. And it kind of changed it. It made the song a lot more like, I don't know, like Justice or like electronic synth pop or something. But I was like, this is the juxtaposition.
So did that bass then change the way that you sang it?
Interesting.
I'm curious.
No, because I had laid down the vocals and written the whole melody. So really, his addition shifted the format of the song. So now we introduced an instrumental section where it was just screams, and I would just sample my voice. Wow, you know, adding in all those that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So this kind of character matches perfectly with our bass, right? Exactly, that's that marriage. So now we cut the vocals over to another section to go along with that bass. And then the bass would drop out and everything soars again. Wow. So, you know, it's funny. Sometimes you give up on a track, you're like, I guess it's done. But sometimes having that extra month to just throw it, you know, to someone else. What would Chucky do on this track? You know, just see, you know, you send it back. It's like, no, I don't like it, you know? Or, wow, okay.
Yeah.
I never would have thought of that.
Yeah. On that note, though, so like when I threw this Orba preset back to you, like what was it like making your? It's so meta, right? Because like you made the song, I kind of like got to think of it differently, and then like you got to make another one. Like what was that like?
So fun. Like it's so rewarding to hear a song you made like deconstructed before your eyes. And, I mean, I was mentioning this to someone before that. This is not dissimilar to my process. I often do deconstruct my own songs and then rebuild them again. I once went to this art exhibition where it said they were gathering art from all of these storage houses from across the world in Mexico. All these artists that had put pieces of art that had not sold or been exhibited, and they kept them in storage because they're very large. Maybe one day they'd have a future. But right now, they were just stored away, gathering dust. So this woman went out to gather all of the outcasts of these artists in Mexico.
That's awesome.
They had no relevance to each other. She put them all in a huge gallery space. She said in the description of the exhibition that, you know, when you deconstruct art, put it back together in a new format, it gains a new meaning in the reassembling of the abstract parts. And it's kind of like what we're doing with this, you know? I'm discovering a new meaning for the song. Cutting up the lyrics as well. Okay, so for my remix of the song, I used these samples. These two, oscillating back and forth. So it actually has a whole new meaning when you just hear over and over, pictures of, over and over. The song itself didn't have such a focus on that, but when you just hear over and over, pictures of us, over and over, pictures. Now we're in a new space for the song.
Yeah, you're in that loop.
Right.
You can really explore that.
Yeah.
It would breathe a whole new kind of song that someone can talk about, just that area of it. That's great. You know, but you said something that was so beautiful, and it was such a good way to understand how people make music, right? Like that, it's really about how you not just curate, but how you create new relationships between sounds together. How that in and of itself is the act of making meaning. And I thought that was such a wonderful way of what your insight was into creating music. And it's kind of, even for me watching you play with it, I'm like, oh, like this is like your assemblage or your reassemblage of sounds for other people to create meaning out of.
Yeah.
I thought that was really amazing.
Well, it's really rewarding for me as an artist to bring people into my world. That's really what I'm doing with my music. It's really a symptom of loneliness. I don't feel understood a lot of the time.
That's right.
I don't always feel like I can use my words to sufficiently explain myself. But when you give people the sounds individually, now they can really step into your world.
Yeah.
Which is the reason why I make art. So it's kind of like perfect for me. Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of you're letting everybody into your drawer right now.
Yeah.
Oh, it's great. It's wonderful. It's very organized, actually.
Well, another thing about replay that is interesting to me and something I am exploring in the music video is this idea of loops. It's kind of my greatest fear, is to be stuck on loop. I don't know, I'm just always been like, I'm not terrified of heights, not terrified of sharks or spiders. I'm just scared of like never escaping an infinite loop. Like, doesn't that sound terrifying?
Whoa.
And I don't just mean like in an existential sense. I mean like in relationships, just like doing the same shit over and over again, making the same mistakes, and never being able to escape the infinite cycle. I mean, I think that actually probably is the definition of hell as well, you know? Not just in a religious sense, but also just like the psychological experience of just not being able to escape a certain thought loop or compulsion or addiction. So it's also really meta and interesting for me to explore. Over and over and over, over and over and over. I don't know if I'm making my point, but it's also interesting to me to have these samples on infinite loop as an experience for the user. If they hold it down, it'll just keep playing, right? Or if you just keep triggering it, it'll just keep playing. Which is another experience of the song. I want to give people the feeling of what it's like to be just like relentlessly tied to something.
I mean, kind of bringing it back to the beginning of the conversation, it was, you're literally bringing people into that meditation experience of what you had to go through, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
It's interesting because there are loops in your music, loops in the loose sense of like, you know, different sections that are going together. But it seemed like you figure out this way how to not just utilize a loop and be in the loop, but some way to kind of transcend over that and to really create this arc between loops.
I always like to use the word topography, right? So every part of the earth has different terrains. Making music is the same. You know, I think of the topography. It's really boring to just walk on flat land forever. You know, I want to go on a hike sometimes and, you know, go into the valleys, to the Grand Canyon, you know? So I guess loops are interesting, yes, but how do I break out of them? Because that's the human evolution. We're not going to survive if we don't break out of our patterns. So topography is a good way to think about it. What's the terrain? Where are we going? How are we telling a story in the arc? That's the perfect word of the song.
Well, great. I think this was wonderful. Like, thank you so much for your time, for your energy, for really putting your spirit into this thing, and for giving us all guidance on how to break out of the loop as well, you know? So I think people are going to have a wonderful time with it, and really thank you so much for trusting me.
Well, thanks for your thoughtfulness in unpacking the song.
Oh my gosh, excited to do more. You made it to the other side. Out of the Jumanji.
I'm a different person.